This is the Crowd Crux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Brigman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Brigman.
What's up, crowdfunders? Salvador Brigman here with the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. And today's episode, I think you're going to get a lot out of it. I brought on an entrepreneur who has raised over $60,000 with an amazing crowdfunding campaign on Rocket Hub, one of the premier crowdfunding platforms out there. I think aside from Kickstarter and Indiegogo, actually Rocket Hub is one of the crowdfunding sites that I first learned about. So we get to learn a little bit about that and also the strategy that went into her financial raise. And also, she has built a $1 million company called Cyber PR, which she started just at the age of 24. That's a big leap at that age to start a whole new company. But over the last 20 years, she's built it up. She's learned a lot. And she's bringing pretty much all of that knowledge to you with this podcast episode. And there's even more. Like, this is just not the end of the story. She coalesced all of this knowledge into a new book called CrowdStart, the ultimate guide to a powerful and profitable crowdfunding campaign. So this is a guidebook that if you're looking to raise money through crowdfunding and you're a creative type, you're wondering what to do on day 3. How am I going to actually plan this campaign? I think this is a great book for you to check out. So we're going to go into what she's learned from that crowdfunding campaign, what she's learned about PR, what you can actually do to improve the chance that you're going to raise money on a site like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or Rocket Hub, along with her story and why she is so passionate about helping these creative types like me. So I hope that you enjoy this episode of the podcast. And also, I would really appreciate it if you could take a second to subscribe to this podcast if you enjoy the episode, and also take a sec to rate this podcast in iTunes. I think that'd mean really just a lot to me, but also to be able to show these reviews to the guests of the show, to show the impact that they're having in people's lives. That is also really cool to be able to do. So thank you if you decide to leave an iTunes review. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode where we talk with Ariel, who founded Cyber PR and recently published the book CrowdStart. Ariel, welcome to the podcast. I've been dying to have you on. It seems like you have a lot of experience in the crowdfunding arena, also a lot of experience with PR in general, and you have a really cool story. So I've been looking forward to chatting with you. And also, you're in Brooklyn, New York, just like I am.
Very cool. Although it's always funny when you're meeting someone on the internet, we could be anywhere.
Very true. Very true. I'm in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
I am in Park Slope. So as the crow flies, we are very close. But as the G train runs, we are very far.
Exactly. And for anyone listening, you definitely have to check out Williamsburg or Park Slope or Brooklyn in general if you ever come to New York. That's always one of my huge recommendations. So I'd like to get into your story first. I think a lot of people on this podcast are sort of searching for how to actually run a successful crowdfunding campaign, and we're going to get into that. But before that, I just want to ask you to share a little bit about your story.
So my story is I was like so many entrepreneurs. I started with just a passion. And my passion when I graduated from university with my liberal arts degree was I was passionate about music, and I wanted to be in the music industry. And like so many other 21-year-olds that want to be in the music industry, I had a pretty deep reality check that you don't just walk in and get your job in the music industry. So I had a series of internships. I was an assistant on a morning show at a major radio station here in New York. I moved back in with my parents. They were delighted. Luckily, I'm born and raised in New York City, so I had the position of living in Manhattan, which was very useful. And I started scrapping my way into the industry. Finally got a job at a little record label, worked for them for a year. Then I got a job at a concert promotions company, worked for them for a year, and then started my own business at the giant age of 24.
Oh, wow.
I basically got fired from my job at the concert promotions company because the owner of the business was totally out of his mind. And I took a go. I decided I'm going to try to start my own PR firm. And I did. And it just turned 20 years old. So I am a lifer.
Congrats.
Thank you.
That's a big milestone right there.
It's incredible. And of course, the music business has changed so radically in those 20 years. And as I emerged as a successful female entrepreneur, my passion is still very much with music and musicians and being in the music industry, but my company now serves musicians, artists, as well as creative entrepreneurs. So I'm very passionate about helping entrepreneurs win and succeed. And because I've run a company in the black for 20 years, and I've had to learn so many things by trial and error, I have a real passion for helping other entrepreneurs find their way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Also, just learning about your story, I imagine just setting up the business at the age of 24, you're learning so many different things. And I'm willing to bet that for those people out there that are launching crowdfunding campaigns, it feels a little bit like that. Like it feels a little bit like overload. There are so many things to learn. There's so much you need to know. So congratulations on running that for 20 years. Geez, that's a great milestone.
Oh, thank you.
So what have you learned actually, I guess in the last, let's say 5 years, what's been your focus on the PR front that you could share with the audience? Things that are working for creative types out there, or even maybe just the way that you need to approach PR or marketing.
Sure. So the thing that's really cool about PR and marketing right now in 2016 and beyond is the whole gatekeeper thing. Yes, you could hire a great marketing strategist, you could hire a fabulous publicist or get someone on your team. But the amazing thing and the major disruptor, obviously, of not only the past 5 years, but of the past 10 is social media, and the way that things function now make it so much easier for you to try your own PR, and blogs and every type of social site makes it so that everything that you do is now part of building your PR story. And that didn't used to be like that. You used to have to hire someone to kind of position you and strategize and write a press release. And there was a formal way that the whole publicity world worked. The thing that's cool now is if you have an idea that deserves publicity, you have the power to spin it and go for it yourself. And that is very powerful. It's also clutters the marketplace, but the thing that's so cool right now is any single one of us, whether our companies are 1 month old or 20 years old, has the possibility of creating a brand, creating a voice, creating how you look online. And if you feel like you've got a newsworthy thing, you can absolutely do and get your own PR if you understand the basic principles of how to do that.
Exactly. And that's a monumental shift, in my opinion. It's really giving power to the creative types, giving them back the power. And like you said, destroying the gatekeepers, allowing you to actually genuinely connect with an audience. That's amazing. We're doing a podcast here. We have lots of listeners. That would be much more expensive 10, 20 years ago to do something like that. So it's crazy to me just how technology has enabled all of this. I want to get a little bit of an idea of when actually crowdfunding entered the picture for you. So when did you start to think of doing a crowdfunding campaign? Could you share a little bit of that story with the audience?
Sure. So, obviously, being in the music industry, we were very early adopters in the crowdfunding space. And I actually spoke on a panel in 2007 with one of the original crowdfunding sort of masterminds. And there was a guy who I actually need to look up his name. So if I can circle back around with this on the recording, I can't believe I can't remember at this moment.
Yeah, we can include it in the show notes later.
Yeah. So I spoke on a panel with a man who had started a crowdfunding platform, and he was explaining to me before we went out and did our panel, how and what he was doing. And it was so mind-blowing what he was saying. I couldn't even understand what he was explaining. So it was absolutely wild. And his name was Brian Camilio, and his crowdfunding platform is called Artist Share. And
yep,
so
I've heard of them, definitely.
Yeah, so Brian was literally the first person to build a crowdfunding platform. And I couldn't even understand what he was saying. It was wild. But of course, as time went on, people started talking more and more about it, and artists started turning, especially artists that I work with. I work mostly in the independent music business. So a lot of the clients that I was working with, obviously record deals were not easy to come by. Publishing deals are not easy to come by. Anything that is a cash infusion in the music industry is hard to come by. So more and more artists were turning towards crowdfunding. And so it started coming across my desk a lot. And then I started seeing my artists launching their own crowdfunding campaigns and doing, even without platforms, they were kind of just doing it with their mailing lists. They were doing it with Artist Share and Brian's company. And then, of course, things started really picking up, and Kickstarter and Pledge Music and Indiegogo came into the picture. And I started beginning to, part of my day in, day out work was listening to artists talking about how their campaigns were going, what they were going to do with the money, what their visions were. And so I began to become involved, just helping them, how can we get some PR for your campaign? Or how can we help you, get over the hump on getting your funding in? And I decided that I wanted to do my own crowdfunding campaign, which I did in 2013 after years of watching other people do it.
And what was that project for?
So actually, ironically, part of it was what we're talking about today. Even though I run a successful business as an entrepreneur and have made money, I never had a huge amount of money to do bigger things for my business. So CrowdStart, which is my book that we're talking about, is my fourth book, but I'd always self-published. I'd always bootstrapped. Every time I would release a book, I never really could afford to hire a great editor and a really good graphic designer or a marketing team or anyone. I just sort of did all these books myself. And I thought my dream is to write a book and actually have the money to afford to really put it out there in a bigger way. Plus, I wanted to rebrand my agency. For years, it was called Ariel Publicity, and I wanted to rebrand it Cyber PR, build a really nice website, and you need money for all those things. So my crowdfunding campaign was to help me rebrand my company, launch an online course for creative people that helps them master social media, and I wanted the money to really make a go at this book. So that's what I did. And
so was the campaign for raising money for this book, was it for the course? What specifically was the project for?
It was for all three things. So okay. I had a crazy crowdfunding campaign because I was asking for all these things. I wanted to create the course, I wanted to publish the book, and I wanted to take my business to the next level.
Okay.
And that's what I asked for. And
What was your goal, out of curiosity, your fundraising goal there?
it was $50,000.
Okay, and you ended up raising over 60,000?
Exactly.
Congrats. Pretty good success too. I think the publishing category is actually a lot harder than the other categories out there. So that does speak to your abilities to market your campaign and, get publicity about it. So,
well, I mean, it also spoke to the fact that I had been blogging for years and sharing a lot of information with my community. So I had, really built a big tribe and an audience and a newsletter list. So I decided I was going to try to monetize what I had built.
I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to The Gadget Flow. If you haven't heard of them, their product discovery platform has over 5 million regular monthly visitors. They have over 100,000 subscribers. And if you want access to this massive marketplace, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit, and they will help you promote your Kickstarter or Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign. Also, use code CrowdCrux20 for 20% off of all of their offerings. Again, that is thegadgetflow.com/submit. For the entrepreneurs in the audience that are also looking to do some kind of crowdfunding campaign for something like this, a book or an information product, what do you think should be the goal in terms of an email list? People are like, well, should I wait until I have 1,000 subscribers on my email list? Should I go for 5,000? What are your thoughts on that?
In my books about social media, I often say that I think a really good jumping off point for a newsletter list should be 1,000 people, because if you have a 20% open rate, that's not a whole lot of people seeing your newsletter. But I really think that, and I love your beginner's guides to fundraising on Crux and what you've written, because I think you really help people walk through the basics way before you launch your campaign. It really depends on how responsive. I think especially in social media, we get obsessed with big numbers, like, you're nothing unless you have 1 million views or, 100,000 followers. That's not true. If you have 5,000 followers and they're the right followers and they respond to you, I wouldn't get so hung up on the size of your mailing list or the size of your community. What you want to get hung up on is, if I actually asked these people for money, how many of them would come forward?
The level of engagement.
Yeah.
I think that's a great bit of advice there. We do see so many people, like, you have, say, a list of 10,000 people, but how many people are actually opening those emails? How many people are engaging, are clicking the links, are actually one of your raving fans? I think you said that exactly how it is. So let's continue with the story here. So you launched this campaign, you raised over $60,000. This was 2013, I believe you said.
Yep.
What happened after that? Like, you've done this massive campaign. What happened after that? It's been a few years since then.
Well, let's back up, because I think it's important to talk about what happened during the campaign, which was, it was like the hardest 30 days of my life. And I never expected that. It was terrifying. It was confronting. There were weeks where I just would lie in bed at night going, oh my goodness, like, nobody cares. Nobody's going to give me this money. That was a bit too big of an ambition. I should have maybe just asked for 5,000 and not 50. I mean, your head begins to go crazy when you do a crowdfunding campaign. And this is what I talk about in my book a lot, because it's really confronting, and it's hard to put yourself out there. So after I got through that 30 days and I did end up with beyond my goal, which was amazing, everything changed. And I did manage to rebrand my company. I built the new website. I launched the book, which actually I used the money to launch 2 books. So I published a book called Cyber PR for Musicians. I then really started to transform my business, and it started attracting different types of clients, which was my goal. And I did so much that I actually got into the classic crowdfunding pitfall, which is I didn't deliver all of the things that I promised. And here we are 2.5 years later, and I'm finally, putting this book out, which was one of the many things that I crowdfunded for. I did put out, a very rough sketch of this book to satisfy my funders. But this is also the reality, is what happens after is sometimes you don't deliver all of the rewards as fast as you thought you were going to.
Well, it's a creative process. It's not like you're just going there and you're buying a finished product. You actually have to make this product. So I do think that some creators get hung up on that a bit. Sometimes the product isn't exactly as they envisioned, but the important thing I think is that you do try your best to deliver on your promises. So was this a campaign on Kickstarter, on Indiegogo? Which platform did you launch on, or was it self-hosted?
I launched on a platform because a friend of mine was the owner and the founder of the platform, called Rocket Hub.
Yes, I know Rocket Hub. I think I met them at a New York Mixer, maybe like a year or two ago or so.
Yep.
They have a really great platform. Definitely recommend anyone listening to go and check them out. They have a very, I think, good support team too, at least at the time that I was researching them. Yeah,
they do. And so right now it's down. I think they're retooling the site, and it should be up again soon, I hope, because it is a really lovely platform. But I did go with them, and I did it mostly because I knew them personally, and I was very grateful for that relationship, because I could call Brian in the middle of the night upset and go, "Oh my God, I'm not going to make my goal." And it was very, very nice to have someone. Of course, many of the platforms do come with support, but it was really nice to have a personal friend.
With your crowdfunding campaign, what did you find to be the largest source of pledges? Do you think it was the email list, as you said before? Was it social media? Was it, from PR hits? Where were all of these pledges coming from?
100% my email list. So, I mean, not 100%, but I would say that is the thing that was the most important. And the more analytics I do, and the more statistics I run, and the more I research crowdfunding, the more I realize that is the core. Of course, you do need to publicize it all over social media if you can get publicity, which I did because I'm a publicist. So I actually did a lot of interviews on blogs, and in my niche market, I got a lot of attention. But really, where my funding came was not only from my mailing list and blasting out like, "Hey, I'm doing a campaign," but this was the humbling part. I had to go and ask individually, family members, friends, colleagues, and not hiding behind MailChimp. I had to pick up the phone. I had to write personal emails. I mean, I even remember having to call my cousin, who is one of my best friends and a huge supporter, and someone who's been amazing in my life. And she had not donated. And I thought, did I offend her by asking? Did I do something bad? And I called her and I was like, "Hey, I don't know if you saw that I've emailed you multiple times." And she was so embarrassed. She said, "I can't believe this. It's been on the top of my to-do list for weeks, and I even have it in my shopping cart, and I couldn't figure out where to put my credit card." And so I realized, you need to hit up everyone that you know that you think might support you, and that's really where you're going to get a great amount of your money. And then, of course, people from social media and people that I didn't know donated, which was so exciting. But the core has to come from the people that you know, your colleagues, your friends, your families, your coworkers, and you cannot be afraid to individually ask each and every one of them to contribute.
I think that people, like you and me in the business world or are familiar with marketing, we're really okay with asking people for things multiple times. But for many creative types in the audience, they will actually shy away from that because they don't want to think "Oh, I don't want to bother this person," or "Oh, I don't want to disrupt the friendship." More often than not, people just have a busy life. and they do want to support you. They do want to pledge to your campaign if they're a good friend, but they just need a little bit of pushing and reminding in a very courteous way, but in a way that underscores this campaign is only live for 30 days. Like, we have to get your pledge in now.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very jarring experience for many people out there, just to see, wow, I thought either more people would, or, hey, these people are giving that I never thought this person that I went to high school with would give money to my campaign, but they did.
Yeah, which is so cool. And I mean, I coach a lot of artists and talk to a lot of artists. And I remember about a year ago, I had a client who was running a very ambitious crowdfunding campaign, and I could see that it wasn't going well. And I could see that he was really not going to make his goal. And I called him up and said, hey, you got to get on the phone and you got to start asking people, because he was telling me about all these great relationships he had and all the people in his life that he had made a difference for, and he couldn't understand why they weren't donating. And just like you said, people are so busy. You think that they are looking at your Facebook. You think that they see your tweets, but they don't. And I said, you got to pick up the phone. And he said to me, and I'm quoting, I would rather die than call anyone.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And sure enough, the campaign did not succeed because he got hung up on being too terrified to ask. So you really do have to, I mean, it's simple to say get over that because it's really hard and confronting, but you really do need to understand that if you are going to go for this, and if this is something that you're interested in doing, you might have to get out of your comfort zone, and that is asking people. And the rewards are so much greater than the uncomfort, but it's definitely requires some soul searching in the asking world.
There's a quote out there that all great things lie on the edge of your comfort zone. So when you even are willing to do that, you take that action, you ask your friend, or you have that uncomfortable conversation, that then gives you more confidence, say, in your business to push even further. So I think it's both a great to raise money, but it's also a growing and a learning experience. And it seems like you've also learned a lot from doing this campaign. I did want to ask you, though, if everything comes down to really rallying your crowd, your email list, what do you think the value is of PR and social media? Is that like an icing on the cake? How do you think people can leverage that?
Yeah, and I mean, I talk about this a lot in the book. I keep going back to the book because I really did put my soul in this book around my experience with PR and crowdfunding. And I think that when you're doing a crowdfunding campaign, of course, to you, it's personal and it's important, but you have to understand where PR fits in, because the truth of the matter is when you see crowdfunding campaigns in the media, and I write about this. I write about what a PR-worthy campaign looks like, and the ones that you see tend to be like the Pebble watch, the coolest cooler. That guy, Igor, remember like a couple years ago, he had a size, I think it was 15 or 16 foot. He literally couldn't get any shoes to wear because he was such a large man. And he did a crowdfunding campaign to have a shoemaker make shoes for him. And it was so newsworthy and interesting that everybody got on the bandwagon, and Nike got in it and made him a pair of custom sneakers. And I mean, that's newsworthy. Most of us, publishing a book or doing a little passion project, I don't want to say little, that's mean, but an artist that's recording an album, this is not massive news. And so I think the problem is people think, I'm doing something that's so important to me. You have to really ask yourself, is it important to the media? And most of the time, it's not. But that doesn't mean that it's not important to the niche media. And this is the best thing to think about if you're trying to get publicity for your crowdfunding campaign and you have a very, very narrow focus. Like I know you do a lot of nonprofit fundraising coaching. You have to figure out, okay, who in my nonprofit world cares? Is it blogs that are talking about helping children or helping animals or curing cancer? Or is it something in the sciences? Find those tiny blogs where your niche market is reading about news in your industry, where they're coming together to talk about things. And that's where you want to try to get your publicity. Don't worry about, getting in the New York Times if you live in New York, or getting, these large websites to pay attention like entrepreneur.com. They're not going to care until it's something so sensational. So focus on the small types of publicity and leverage those. And I think that if you add that into your crowdfunding campaign, it's absolutely useful. But again, it's not where you're going to get a majority of your money. You still have to go back to your core friends, family, colleagues. If you can get some publicity in the blogosphere, that's great. Of course, you do want to leverage social media, and there's a lot of science about how much social media you should use. And absolutely, you need to be pushing your campaign across your social channels. But again, just a little tweet or a little Facebook post or a little Snapchat is not where people are going to get their wallets out and give you money.
That's some great advice. There's definitely power in specificity, not just specificity in terms of targeting niche blogs, but also if you're doing Facebook advertising, if you're trying to get in the minds and the hearts of other people, specificity is definitely power. The other thing I'll say for those listening is PR is an amazing tool to leverage social proof. That because all of these publications are writing about you, it definitely raises your credibility among so many other artists out there. So even just being able to display the logos of smaller blogs that have written about you. There's a great book out there called Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday, which talks about the media industry and how it works, how blogs work, how social media works, in addition to CrowdStart, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But that's a great book. I learned about trading up the value chain. So starting with a small blog and then leveraging that influence to a larger blog. That's another great way to go. But I want to turn the focus of the industry of the interview to CrowdStart and this book that you're now putting out. I was reading the teaser for it. You have a lot of great stuff, sample emails, killer strategies, social media posts, day-to-day, step-by-step actions. This is like a lot of great content that you've put together and very hard-earned lessons. So could you talk a little bit about this book, who it's for, what you're going to get out of it, all that stuff?
Sure. So again, when I did my crowdfunding campaign, I realized how complex it really is, even as a strategist, as someone with a large following on social media, as someone who, my email list has 20,000 people on it. I am not coming from nowhere. And even I couldn't believe how many moving parts I didn't think about during my campaign. So I made it my mission to put together a 30-day plan, because I think what happens is you think you're going to go for it. You choose your platform, you record your video, you choose your tiers. All of that takes strategy. Then you launch your campaign and you don't actually know what to do. And I read so many great articles about crowdfunding and how to do it and the science of crowdfunding and little tips and tricks like what day of the week to launch your campaign and how long it should be and how much money you need to get in the first week in order to succeed. And there's all this great statistics. But what I couldn't find was, what do I do on day 3? What do I do on day 5? How many emails should I send out? How should I ask? And so I decided to make a step-by-step, literally hour-by-hour roadmap for all 30 days, because I realized that was what was missing in the marketplace with all the crowdfunding books and advice out there. So I started making my 30-day sprint, and then I realized, wait a minute, no crowdfunding. So I backed it up and I took all of the advice that I have written about in other books and I write about on my blog, which is social media marketing and how to write an effective newsletter and what you need to do across platforms. So it's a 3-part book. Part 1 is, sorry.
Oh, no, you can go.
Part 1 is all about how to build your tribe way before you even think about launching your crowdfunding campaign. Part 2 is how do you build an effective crowdfunding campaign and what are the assets you need and how many tiers should you have and how long should your video be and all that stuff that people don't know. And then part 3 is literally day 1 to day 30, a step-by-step guide.
What I love about that is you underscore just how frantic, how uncertain it is to run a campaign, to be able to open up this guidebook as sort of holding your hand as you're running a campaign, to look at these day-by-day pages, to really get an understanding of what you need to do. That's going to take a lot of headache out of the equation, and it's going to take a lot of uncertainty out of running this campaign. So if you see, well, maybe some pledges didn't come in today, you can go and reference CrowdStart and see what the book says about that. Or you can see what you should do on this day or what you should do next, rather than just like, I don't know. You can actually reference something, and it's just, to me, like a great blueprint to be able to do that.
Yeah, thanks. And that was what I thought would be the most helpful for people, because it's overwhelming. And again, you Google, how do I crowdfund? And there's a billion fabulous resources and articles and videos and courses you can take and people you can hire. Yes, and wonderful podcasts. But it's true. I didn't find, and that's why I wanted to make a step-by-step guide.
Totally. And where can people check that out?
So there's a free chapter download at my personal website, which is arielhyatt.com. And you can read about the book there. Obviously, it's available on Amazon. It's called CrowdStart, pretty easy to find. And then if you have questions or you want to hit me up about your own crowdfunding experience, I would love to talk to you on Twitter. And you can find me there at CyberPR.
Very cool. And for the people in the audience there are definitely, I think, a lot of people that are looking to run their own campaigns. But if they do want to outsource that, or they do want help, is that something that CyberPR provides? Do you guys work on the PR aspect then of crowdfunding campaigns?
We do, but only for very large raises. I don't do anything less than $50,000. But if you are doing a high raise campaign, we will help with your strategy and your PR, and I will actually take you through my 30-day process with my team. So absolutely.
Okay, and that's cyberpr.com?
That's right.
Definitely. Okay, so you have a newsletter there too, so people can sign up for that. And also a launch project planner. That's kind of cool. I want to learn more about that. Great. So everyone who is listening, I think that Ariel, from just listening to your story and watching how you've transformed, it's been kind of inspiring to me. You know, I'm 25 years old, and to hear that you've done all of this in the last 20 years running this business, that you've launched a successful crowdfunding campaign, that you've been on the ground floor, you've been in the trenches really working on this, helping artists, that's such a very cool legacy to me. And the fact that you've now coalesced all of that information and all of that knowledge into one guidebook, that's something, if you're listening to this, you got to go and pick up a copy. I'm definitely going to check it out more. And it's been great to have you on this podcast. I'm going to give you the last word here, something that you'd like to share with the audience. It could be a word of encouragement. It could be a tip or a bit of advice. What would you like to share with the entrepreneurs in the audience?
My advice is have patience. I think that there's this feeling that we all have when we're trying to build our business, trying to get seen, trying to get out there, that there's this deep sense of urgency. If there's something that being twice your age and running a business for literally as long as you've been alive, if I could talk to my younger self, I think I would say, like, have patience, keep doing it, keep putting yourself out there. Every tweet, every Facebook post, every Snapchat, every blog post you write is a building block for the future of your entrepreneurial journey. And just keep going. I think when we stop and feel like it's too overwhelming or too much, or we're not getting the response that we want, that's where you'll fall down. So that would be my piece of advice is, if I know you just posted that blog post and you didn't get any comments, keep going, because you've got something to say that people eventually will want to hear. And it takes way longer than you think to make an impact.
Definitely. And I'm even very privileged to have all of the readers that we've had, starting this in 2012, having connected with lots of people. It's just so inspiring to me. I think also to you to be able to help these creative entrepreneurs. And it's just very cool to me that in some ways, in small ways, we're changing and we're helping them run these different types of businesses. If there's one theme that I've taken from this interview, it's that due to technology, due to now guidebooks like the one you just put out, there is no more excuses for not launching your campaign and for not focusing on that passion which you've been putting off. So everyone listening, you got to go and do that. But Ariel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been great to have a conversation with you, and I look forward to watching your progress in the years to come.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun talking to you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Brigman. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ariel, talking about crowdfunding, talking about how to launch a great campaign. If you got something out of it, please take a sec to subscribe to this show and also rate and review this podcast in iTunes at crowdcrux.com/rate on iTunes, or with your smartphone device, just open up the app and you can review the podcast there. It's crazy to me that Ariel started her first business, cyber PR, when she was 24 years old, and over the last 20 years built up this business to a multi-million-dollar company. And it actually makes me think a lot. Like, I am 25 years old right now. Where will I be in the next 20 years? What is my legacy? What am I trying to build? What am I bringing to the crowdfunding world? I've always had a very long-term view with CrowdCrux and what I'm doing, but it makes me even think more so about that and the legacy that I want to leave. And that's really the real reason why I put so much effort into putting out podcasts, into putting out blog articles, into now putting out YouTube channels, because I do care very much about the degree to which I improve the lives of other people. And I want that to be a part of my legacy when I look back in 20 years' time. Thanks for joining me on this episode. Again, my name's Sal, and I'll see you next time.